When you're choosing between Cleveland and Columbus, you're not just picking a city, you're choosing a lifestyle, an investment. While both are top cities in Ohio, the real estate markets differ significantly with pricing, demand, and overall vibe. This side-by-side comparison will help you decide where your money goes further. If this is your first time to the channel, please like, subscribe, tap the bell for notifications so you can be the first to know about the market here in Columbus, Ohio, and in this video, Cleveland as well. Hi, my name is Billy Fristo, and I'm a realtor here in the Columbus market. And this is a Living in North Columbus YouTube channel. And we get calls every day from people just like you looking to make a move to this great city. So if you're looking to make that move in 9 days or 9 months, please reach out. Call me, text me, email me, schedule a call. I'd love to help you make that smooth transition here to Columbus and the great state of Ohio. And as always, just call Billy. So let's dive into the comparisons between Cleveland and Columbus here in 2025. Columbus, median home price around $335,000. That's, it goes up every year about 3.2% here in Columbus. So steady growth year after year. In Cleveland, you're looking at about $145,000 median home price. So significantly lower, and prices are gradually going up in Cleveland too, about 1.8% a year. So, definitely a little lower appreciation in Cleveland as opposed to Columbus. But I guess the key insight we can take from this is Cleveland is much more affordable. It offers, lower, barriers to entry into the market, lower home prices, lower down payments, things of that nature. Columbus is a bit more expensive, but still affordable compared to, national averages of some other larger cities, here in the United States. In Columbus, appreciation is going to be faster, and it seems to be a little bit higher. So with that said, let's keep moving. Inventory and housing. In Columbus, we're going to start by saying, there's a balanced inventory here in Columbus, though, demand remains higher in areas such as, Dublin, New Albany, Powell. Those areas are popular with families, tech professionals, and people that are, remote workers that are staying home and, run their business out of their house. These areas also, involve a mix of, new construction, some nice modern urban condos, and master plan communities like New Albany. So the competition is high in these top school districts here in Columbus, Olentangy School District, Dublin School District, Upper Arlington School District. So that's kind of where, inventory, and property types are gonna thrive here in the Columbus market, meaning the inventory is not high in these areas because people really wanna move to these areas that I just talked about, in Dublin, Powell, New Albany. There is opportunity in all of these areas for housing. Like I said, great for families. So that's, Columbus, I would say, has a great mix of, inventory and housing types here. In Cleveland, you're gonna have a higher inventory, especially in, older housing stock. There's a lot of houses, for sale, kind of sitting a little bit. There's more opportunities to buy these properties, flip them, some multifamily, houses for investments. There's unique historic homes in Cleveland too. People revitalizing a lot of these houses, remodeling them. So, the opportunity in Cleveland is greater because there's a little more inventory, for these types of properties. Vacancy rates in some of these areas are, higher than they are in Columbus. But hopefully here in the near future, things get remedied and, some of these people start to buy up some of these houses in Cleveland. So those, are a couple things that I just wanted to touch on with, inventory in Cleveland and in Columbus, where in Columbus, there's lower inventory, Cleveland, higher inventory. As we just talked about with, median home prices, inventory, affordability and cost of living, in Cleveland, they win on affordability, hands down. Lower home prices, property taxes, living costs. Cleveland's gonna be slightly below Columbus on that. Columbus definitely has a higher cost of living, especially in the most desirable neighborhoods, like we talked about, New Albany, Dublin, Powell. But you're also gonna have wages in Columbus tend to be a little bit higher as well. So, it's kind of a trade-off. You're gonna pay more in Columbus, but your wage may be a little higher. So a lot of the factors are, property tax rate. The average in Columbus is 1.5% to 2%. Property tax rate in Cleveland, the average is 1.7% to 2.5%. So property taxes in Cleveland seem to be a bit higher than they are in Columbus. Also, average home insurance in Columbus is gonna be $1,200 a year, and in Cleveland, it's gonna be slightly lower, so at $1,100 a year. So, there's some trade-offs, I guess. Monthly mortgage average in Columbus is $2,200, and in Cleveland, it's $1,100. So, that's $1,000 less in Cleveland for your average, monthly mortgage, which is pretty significant, especially if you're a first-time home buyer or, an investor looking to get, a home for cheaper and to have it appreciate, long-term rental, whatnot. So, there's give and take between Cleveland and Columbus. And don't get me wrong, obviously I live in Columbus and I know there's great areas here. Been to Cleveland, great areas in Cleveland too. Have a lot of friends from college that live there and we visit. So there's give and take. So between, Columbus and Cleveland, when it comes to investment potential, let's start with Columbus. There's strong long-term appreciation here in Columbus with investment properties compared to Cleveland, where we know that the appreciation year after year is over 3%, and in Cleveland, it's just under 2%. So appreciation in Columbus is gonna be a little bit higher. And, some factors into that are, there's a growing job market here, huge. So people are always gonna need rentals, especially when you have like Intel, Amazon, Ohio State, just some of the bigger employers here that, maybe some of their employees are here for short-term, assignments, maybe 2 years, so they lease a place for 2 years. So you're always gonna need, some rentals, and some of those are high-end rentals, others are not. But again, the rental demand here is high, and that's especially near Ohio State and downtown, where 60,000 kids at Ohio State, you're gonna need some rentals, around the university and closer to downtown. You may have lower cap rates here, your potential to make money, lower cap rate here in the Columbus market, but again, with long-term appreciation, those could be a wash. So depending on how long you're trying to keep your investment property, you could get a higher return in Cleveland, but things still are, it's a good market for investors here in Columbus. However, in Cleveland, the cash flow potential is a lot higher, and higher cap rates, which is an indicator of cash flow and your ability to make money on a property. So higher cap rates in Cleveland, that's good for your potential to make money. Cleveland's also very popular with out-of-state investors looking to buy up portfolios and rent them out in the Cleveland market. Some hot spots for gentrification in Cleveland are also contributing to that, where people are coming in, buying houses, fixing them up, renting them out. I guess that market might be a little more risky, but like I said, with higher cap rates, the reward is going to be, there as well. So with high risk comes high reward. Those are just, some thoughts on, investing in Cleveland and Columbus and the differences. So let's keep rolling. Yeah, so as we continue, we just kind of discussed it, the job market and, economic drivers that are driving some of these, real estate factors in Cleveland and Columbus. Let's start with Columbus. Columbus is the fastest growing metro, area in Ohio. So, a lot of growth here, and that is because major employers such as, Ohio State, Nationwide Insurance, Intel, JP Morgan Chase, that is one of the huge factors here, is just the employers here that are large. Like I said, like Ohio State, Nationwide, JP Morgan Chase, Intel is gonna be a huge one. Columbus also always consistently ranks, super high for job growth and livability. So, that's what makes Columbus a good, spot for real estate, just because of the market and growth and, all those things. In Cleveland, with Cleveland Clinic, healthcare and manufacturing, hubs are big up there. Like I said, you have Cleveland Clinic, a huge hospital system up there, and they've expanded, outside of Cleveland, so they're growing. University hospitals, and you have Sherwin-Williams, the paint people up there, and they're huge. In Cleveland, the job market is just like more stable than it is booming. Like here in Columbus, it's growing and growing and growing. In Cleveland, it's more stable. So that works out for local buyers, up in Cleveland looking to move from one suburb to the next, or move from Cleveland out to the suburbs, or vice versa, depending on what they want. So those are kind of some, factors, with the job market and economic drivers that drive real estate is, huge employers here in Columbus. It's growing fast, in Cleveland, you have some employers as well in different sectors, but it's more stable and than it is booming, which, is good for people that love stability and, don't like, risk. So let's keep moving on. So, we just went over the economic factors. Let's talk about, some community, amenities and lifestyles that kind of contribute to, the differences between Columbus and Cleveland here in 2025. In Columbus, with regards to traffic and commuting, the commute's moderate here. 25 to 40 minutes is a normal commute around the city, and that's during rush hour. It can get pretty dicey here in Columbus when it comes to commuting. Been in a couple, start-stop situations for a little bit. So I guess that's one of the bad things about Columbus is, during rush hour, traffic is super high. In Cleveland, the commutes are easier. The city's more spread out. It takes a long time to get to one side of Cleveland to the other. So the suburbs in Cleveland, I feel, are more spread out, and, things don't get as congested in Cleveland. Although I know when you're downtown, that congestion can get a little bit dicey as well. So, just a couple things to think about are, the commutes in either city. It may be a little more of a commute here in Columbus than it is in Cleveland, but I guess it just depends on the time of day, and that's everywhere. Weather, Columbus, we're 2 hours south of Cleveland, so slightly warmer here, less snow, although it still gets bitterly cold. Cleveland, I know the winters are super cold and snowy, especially being right on the lake effect snow. We don't have the lake effect snow that, Cleveland's gonna have, and it makes a huge difference, in those commutes as well that we just talked about. So, and I guess the overall vibe, Columbus, Cleveland is Columbus, tends to be younger, modern, more tech forward, I guess in the atmosphere and what people are, doing. And Cleveland's more, artsy, historic, blue collar roots, that kind of, those are two other difference. Columbus may be a little younger, more tech forward, modern, as opposed to, blue collar, historic, artsy in Cleveland. So just a couple other points to think about. Both areas are gonna have that outdoor, vibe, outdoor activity, that a lot of people love. The metro parks here in Columbus, Scioto Mile downtown, right on the Scioto River, Hocking Hills, is, about 45 minutes southeast of Columbus, which, a lot of hiking trails, a lot of great cabins for rent. Cleveland, you're on Lake Erie. If you love water sports, you got it. They have metro parks, Edgewater Beach, so, beach area. So, there's a lot of things that are similar, but, just different. That's, kind of the community amenities and lifestyle part. So let's keep going. Let's go over some of the areas that, first-time home buyers, luxury buyers, and investors might look at, in Cleveland and Columbus and see, the difference. So in Columbus, these are, some of the areas. So, if you want to jot these down or whatnot, or leave a comment if you're looking at any of these areas, or, reach out, call me, text me, email me. Love to help you make that smooth transition. If you're buying here in the Columbus market or buying in Cleveland, I can help or refer you to someone that can. So, for first-time home buyers here in the Columbus market, a couple great areas just right off the top are gonna be Grove City, Gahanna, even Hilliard, Worthington. Great areas for, first-time home buyers here in the Columbus market. And in Cleveland, first-time home buyers, some good areas are Old Brooklyn, Parma is another great area. So just, a couple areas to think about if you're a first-time home buyer and you're thinking about moving. Luxury home buyers here in the Columbus market, you're looking at New Albany, Upper Arlington, Powell, Dublin, all, great areas for luxury. If you're looking at, those houses in the $1 million plus, you're definitely gonna find them in those areas. Cleveland, Tremont, Shaker Heights, are gonna have some luxury, properties there as well. If you're looking for the high-end, home neighborhoods with great amenities, those are some good areas for you. When it comes to investing in the Columbus market, Linden, Franklinton, those are a couple of areas that, are a little more investor friendly with what you can get, cap rates like we talked about earlier, fix and flips and holds for rental properties. And in Cleveland, you're looking at, Detroit Shoreway, Glenville. Those are, a couple other areas, in Cleveland that, would be good for, they're more investor friendly. Obviously, these are just, suggestions and generalizations. You could find all these in probably all areas, but, in general, just giving you something to think about in some areas in those different markets. I guess, what's your final verdict? When it comes to Cleveland or Columbus and the battle of which one's better for you? I guess when you're talking about budget and low cost of entry into the market, meaning lower down payments, not as much out of pocket to buy a home, Cleveland's gonna be the winner there, hands down, just based on, median home values in Cleveland, Columbus are, just different. So Cleveland's gonna win there. Long-term appreciation, you're looking at Columbus. Columbus is the winner there. If you're looking to be an investor, fix and holds, that long-term appreciation is gonna be better in Columbus. Cash flow investing, you're looking at Cleveland being the winner there. If you're looking, to, fix and flips, fix and rents, you're gonna probably get a higher cap rate and immediate cash flow in Cleveland. So Cleveland's gonna be the winner there. If you're looking to relocate your family, I think Columbus is gonna be the winner, just based on, housing, the areas, what families are looking for, and being family friendly in a lot of these suburbs in and around Columbus. So Columbus is gonna be the winner there for family relo. Retirement value, it could be either, but I think Cleveland might take the cake a little bit on with retirement value, just based, stability, and after you retire, if you want to chill, Cleveland might be a better spot than Columbus. However, Columbus, I feel, would be nice as well. So career growth, with the market here and how it's booming, I would definitely say Columbus would be the route if you're looking, to move based on your career. Columbus is probably the spot, just with the market, how it's growing, opportunities here, and what's coming. Columbus, I think, takes the cake there. It's all opinion, but I'm trying to throw some facts out here and give you a better, clearer view. So if you have any comments, questions, put them in the, comment section below. So if you're looking for, a modern, growing city with stable appreciation, great amenities, Columbus is probably your best bet. But if you want maximum affordability, strong rental returns, some hidden gem neighborhoods, Cleveland has serious upside, especially for savvy investors. So whether you're buying, selling, or investing in Ohio real estate, understanding these two markets is key in making the right move. So if you're thinking of relocating to Cleveland or Columbus or anywhere in central Ohio, if you're thinking of buying, or if you already live here and you're thinking about selling and moving to a different neighborhood, please reach out, call me. I'd love to be your guide, into getting you into your new home, whether it's, your home, an investment property. Please reach out, call me, text me, email me. Love to help you make that smooth transition. And as always, just call Billy, and sure hope to see you around town.